Welcome to the Active Marketer Podcast, where we talk about how to design, automate, and scale your business to the next level using sales and marketing automation. You can find out all the tips, tactics, and techniques you need to get more customers and sell more stuff over at theactivemarketer.com. Now, here's your host, Barry Moore.
Hello, marketing automation fans. This is your host, Barry Moore, and welcome back to episode 8 of the Active Marketer Podcast. Today, we're going to mix up the format a little bit, and this is going to be a new format called Tactical 20. Tactical 20 is all about giving you a short, sharp, implementable piece of advice that you can go away with and implement in your business straight away. So most of these ideas for the Tactical 20 podcast come from listener questions or client questions that we have over at theactivemarketer.com. So I'm going to turn these questions in a Tactical 20 podcast. Less than 20 minutes, you'll be able to take this, implement it in your business, and get started straight away. And don't worry, we're still going to have lots of great episodes with internet marketers telling us about how they use marketing automation in their business. Coming up next week, we'll be talking with ActiveCampaign CEO Jason Vanderboom about ActiveCampaign and their vision for the company and where that product's going. So that's going to be pretty exciting. So tune in for that one. But before we get into this week's episode, we're going to have a little bit of a shameless social proof, where we read out iTunes reviews from you, the listener. So we've got a couple back here in the Australian iTunes store. One from Abibik. It says, great stuff, Barry, 5 stars. Really great interviews. Thanks for sharing these. The business model for WP Curve sounds great. And that's in reference to episode 3 with our guest, Dan Norris from WP Curve. If you haven't listened to that one, go back. It's great. Dan's got a great story. Another 5-star review here from App Creations. It says, highly valuable content. I just listened to the first 3 podcasts and have learned something new in each one of them. It's valuable content that I can apply to my business. Keep the interviews coming. Well, we'll certainly be doing that. We've got some great ones coming up. And one last review from Hank M4000 in Australia. Gives us 5 stars. Says, thank you. I've been struggling to get marketing automation set up in my business. There just isn't much good information out there. This podcast is a godsend. I have some great ideas written down already, and I'm only 2 episodes in. More. Well, great. That's what we're aiming for. We're aiming to get the power of marketing automation out in front of as many people as we can. You can head over to iTunes and leave one, and I'll read it out on a future show. But now let's get into this week's Tactical 20. So this Tactical 20 comes from a question I had from Sarah recently. And Sarah's problem was that she was using another program and using an API to talk back to ActiveCampaign. And that API would only allow her to specify a list that information could be added to. So she was using a program, it had an API talking back to ActiveCampaign, but that API would only allow you to dump a customer into a list. It wouldn't allow you to specify a form, which is usually how we trigger automations and tag people with certain events. So that would mean that if we dump them onto the main list, they would go onto our main list, but without all the normal tagging and action sequences that would normally occur when we get a new customer. So how do I get people onto my main list via an API, but still tag them with all the appropriate tags and fire all the appropriate automations that we want to fire when we get a new customer from a new source? And I deal with that with a concept I call an action list. An action list is separate from your main list, and it simply exists to do all the appropriate processing to a new inbound contact that you want to do. So adding tags to that contact, triggering automations based on the fact that they've come to us from a particular source or from a particular landing page or from a particular opt-in. Fire all the automations appropriate with that new customer and that new entry channel into our business, but still get them onto the main list. So how do we do that? Well, first, inside ActiveCampaign, you want to create a brand new separate empty list, and I usually name that with something like action list opt-in source. So let's say we have a product XYZ landing page. That new action list might look like action list product XYZ. And what happens is I use the API from within the other program. So some programs, for example, like ClickFunnels, will allow you to set up an API integration to ActiveCampaign. But when someone's completing a transaction or completing an opt-in, ClickFunnels and other products may only allow you to specify a particular list. So within those integration settings, I'll choose my action list name, and then associated with that action list will be a number of steps. So I create an automation that starts on someone subscribing to action list product XYZ. And the very first step is to tag them. And I usually tag them with a source tag, which tells me where we got that customer, what was the source of this lead, or what was the source of this customer. In this case, it was a product XYZ opt-in. So I might have source product XYZ opt-in. Then I might trigger off some other automations based on that tag, or I might trigger off some other automations based on subscribing to the list. I might give them any other appropriate tags I want to give them. So they might be a lead for a related product that I might want to upsell to them later and tag them with a lead tag. So in that automation that fires based on them joining the action list or subscribing to the action list, I do all the tagging and all the actions that I want to do associated with that opt-in channel. So they've come in from product XYZ. I want to tag them with this, and this, and I want to fire off automation 1 and automation 2. Once I've done that, and I've tagged them and added all those automations appropriately, then the very last 2 steps on that automation are to subscribe them to my main list and then unsubscribe them from my action list. So what that does is it allows you to do all the appropriate tagging as that customer is inbound to your list, and then move them over to your main list. So they move over to the main list with all those tags and all those automations still working. And then we unsubscribe them from the action list. So the action list is always sitting there empty, and we don't confuse it with a main list or any other list. You can, as an option, you can leave them on the action list as kind of a reference to how many people have gone through that action list. Because unlike other tools like Aweber, where you get charged for each repeat of a customer, so if a customer is on 4 different lists, you get charged 4 different times. Inside ActiveCampaign, you'll only be charged once for that customer, no matter how many lists they are. So there's no harm in leaving them there, but it can make things confusing when you go back into your ActiveCampaign panel and there's a bunch of lists there with a bunch of people on it. I just prefer to have a main list and then clean out the action list as people go through it. So how do you get started building an action list? Well, look at your API limitations. If you're coming from a program that only allows you to join a list, create an action list, figure out, based on that opt-in channel that customer is coming in through, what do we want to tag them with and what automations do we want to fire? Build that into an automation that fires on user subscribes to our action list. All those things will fire, and then at the end of that automation, you can add them to the main list and then remove them from the action list, or you can just leave them on the action list and end that automation. So what happens if you don't have an action list? Well, if you have customers coming in through an API and your only option is to add them to the main list and you don't have an action list, they're just going to go straight onto your main list and they're not going to get tagged with anything. And what you're going to end up with is negating the power of using a marketing automation system in the first place, because you're going to miss out on all that opportunity to tag them and fire automations for follow-up sequences or onboarding sequences or upsell or cross-sell sequences. So it's very important that you use your marketing automation system to its best ability, and you're delivering the most relevant message, the right message to the right customer at the right time. That's really the power of marketing automation. So your action steps from this Tactical 20 is go away and look at the other systems you might be integrating with ActiveCampaign, like Leadpages or ClickFunnels or Opt-in Monster. See how their API works and whether you can add them via a nominated form or whether you have to add them straight to a list. And if you have to add them straight to a list, go ahead and create an action list for those inbound customers. So that's it for this week's Tactical 20. Go out there and implement your action list today. There's your actionable tip for this week, the concept I call action lists. And as I said, this actually came from a question that was asked to us over on the activemarketer.com blog from Sarah. So we really love to hear your feedback. We love to hear what you're struggling with, and we love to come up with solutions to help you get around those problems. So if you've got an idea for an upcoming Tactical 20 session, or you've got a problem, or you've got a limitation, go over to the show notes for this episode, which you can find over at theactivemarketer.com/action. And leave us a comment in the comment section down below. Tell us what you're struggling with, or tell us what topic you'd like to see on a future Tactical 20 episode, and we'll make that happen. And we'd also love to get a review over on iTunes, and we'll read one out if you leave us one. So thanks, everybody. That's your Tactical 20 for this week. That's your homework. Go out there and play with action lists and see all the great things that they can do for you. See you next week on the Active Marketer Podcast. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the Active Marketer Podcast. You can find the show notes and all the latest marketing automation news over at theactivemarketer.com.